Hello everyone, I'm Michelle, and welcome back to my channel where we explore the darkest corners of human experience. Tonight, I have 3 absolutely chilling stories for you, all true accounts from people who found themselves completely alone in the city when darkness fell. These aren't just ghost stories or urban legends. These are real experiences that happen to real people, and they'll make you question everything you think you know about being alone at night. So dim the lights, get comfortable, and let me take you into the shadows of the urban night. But first, if you enjoy content like this, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. Now, let's begin with our first story. My name is Sarah Chen, and I need to tell someone what happened to me. I'm not sure anyone will believe it, but I have to try. I work the late shift at a downtown call center, getting off at 2 a.m. every weeknight. The walk to my apartment was only 6 blocks, but those 6 blocks, they changed everything. It started like any other Tuesday night. Well, technically Wednesday morning by the time I clocked out. Mike, my supervisor, let me leave 13 minutes early because it was dead, barely any calls coming in. I grabbed my messenger bag, checked that my pepper spray was still clipped to my keys, and headed out into the night. The street was quiet, bathed in that amber glow of streetlights that makes everything look like an old photograph. I'd made this walk hundreds of times. I knew every crack in the sidewalk, every broken streetlight, every shortcut. It was routine. Block 1 down, 5 to go, I said to myself, like I always did. I passed the 24-hour laundromat where an elderly man sat reading a newspaper under flickering fluorescent lights. The homeless regulars were bundled in doorways, fast asleep. Everything was normal. That's when I first heard them, footsteps behind me. Not unusual. Other people work late shifts too. But when I slowed down, the footsteps slowed down. When I sped up, they sped up. I glanced over my shoulder and saw a figure in a dark hoodie about half a block behind me, hands shoved deep in their pockets. Probably nothing, I whispered to myself, but my heart was already beating faster. I turned left onto Maple Street, the darker block where 2 streetlights were out. The footsteps followed. I quickened my pace, passing a boarded-up restaurant covered in graffiti. A cat darted across the street, nearly giving me a heart attack. When I looked back again, the figure was still there, maintaining that same distance. I decided to test my suspicion. At the next intersection, instead of going straight toward my apartment, I turned right, the long way home. The footsteps turned right too. My heart started racing. I pulled out my phone to check my signal. 3 bars. Good. But this block was even more desolate, just an abandoned gas station with broken windows like empty eye sockets, surrounded by a torn chain-link fence. The footsteps were getting closer. I turned around, trying to get a better look, but in the dim light I could only make out the silhouette of someone in dark clothing. "Can I help you with something?" I called out, louder than I intended. The figure stopped walking. Silence. I waited, gripping my phone so tight my knuckles went white. Then they took a step forward. And another. I ran. My bag bounced against my hip as I sprinted down the sidewalk. Behind me, I could hear heavy boots pounding on concrete, getting closer with every step. I reached the end of the block and turned left, back toward my normal route. 4 blocks to my apartment. 4 blocks to safety. The footsteps were right behind me now. I ducked into an alley between 2 buildings and pressed myself against the cold brick wall, trying to control my breathing. The footsteps slowed, then stopped. I held my breath, listening to nothing but the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Silence. I peered around the corner. The street looked empty. Maybe I'd lost them. Maybe they'd given up. I waited another 30 seconds, then carefully stepped back onto the sidewalk. I walked quickly but quietly, staying close to the buildings, past the closed pharmacy, the check cashing place, the small grocery store. 2 blocks to go. That's when I saw him. The figure in the hoodie was standing under a streetlight at the next intersection. Waiting. He was ahead of me now. My blood turned to ice. How had he gotten in front of me? I backed up, looking for another route, but the alley behind me was a dead end and all the buildings were locked tight. The figure started walking toward me. I ran back the way I came, pulling out my phone as I went. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's following me, I gasped. I'm downtown, on Maple Street near. My phone died. Battery, 0%. No. The 24-hour laundromat. It was only a block away. I ran toward it, the footsteps behind me growing louder and closer. I burst through the door, gasping for air. Please, I need help. Someone's following me. The elderly man looked up from his newspaper. His eyes were completely white. No pupils. No iris. Just empty, milky white. He's been waiting for you, Sarah, he said in a voice like grinding metal. I screamed and ran back outside. The street was full of people now. But they were all wrong. A woman in a business suit stood motionless in the middle of the road, her head twisted at an impossible angle. A man in jogging clothes ran backward, his face pointing the wrong direction. A child sat on a fire hydrant with her legs bent in ways legs shouldn't bend. They all turned to look at me with those same white, empty eyes. The figure in the hoodie was walking toward me from the end of the block. I ran toward my apartment building, weaving between these nightmare people who stood perfectly still, watching me with their hollow stares. I reached my building and fumbled for my keys. The lobby door was just 10 feet away. Safety was just 10 feet away. The figure was getting closer. My hands shook as I tried to unlock the door. The key wouldn't turn. I looked back. 20 feet away now. I tried the key again. This time it worked. I rushed inside and slammed the door behind me. The lobby was empty and normal. Just normal. I pressed my back against the door, breathing heavily, and looked through the glass. The street was empty again. No strange people. No figure in a hoodie. Just the quiet downtown night I knew. What the hell was that? I whispered. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor and unlocked my apartment door. Once inside, I engaged every lock I had and plugged in my phone. When it powered up, I immediately called 911. 911, what's your emergency? I was being followed. Downtown on Maple Street. There were all these people, but they weren't right. Ma'am, are you safe now? Yes, I'm home. But something's wrong. Really wrong. I'm showing multiple calls from your area tonight. Similar reports. Officers are en route. I looked out my window at the street below. Everything appeared normal. But in the reflection of the glass, I saw something that stopped my heart. Standing behind me in my apartment was the figure in the hoodie. I spun around. My apartment was empty. I looked back at the window. The reflection showed only me. My phone rang. Hello? The night shift never ends, Sarah. The voice was distorted, electronic. The line went dead. I looked at my phone. The caller ID showed my own number. I had called myself. Outside my window, every streetlight on the block went out at once. The city plunged into darkness. In that darkness, I saw hundreds of white eyes staring up at me from the street below. I backed away from the window. My apartment door was open. I never unlocked it. Standing in the doorway was the figure in the hoodie. This time, I could see the face. It was my own face. But with those same white, empty eyes. "Time for the night shift, Sarah," she said. I tried to scream, but no sound came out as everything went black. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I woke up, I was sitting at my desk in the call center. The clock read 1:47 a.m. My supervisor Mike was walking over. "Sarah, you can head out early. It's dead tonight." I looked at my hands. They were shaking. "Thanks, Mike," I heard myself say. I gathered my things, my messenger bag, my pepper spray, my phone. And I walked toward the door. Because the night shift never ends. And I think I'm not the only Sarah walking home tonight. My name is Marcus Chen, and I need to tell you about the Meridian Tower before I forget again. I worked security at this 40-story office building in the financial district. My shift ran from midnight to 8 a.m., and most nights were routine, walking the floors, checking locks, monitoring the cameras from my desk station in the marble lobby. The Meridian Tower was one of those gleaming monuments to corporate success, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky like a finger pointing at God. At 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, routine ended forever. I was making my rounds on the 15th floor when I heard it, the soft chime of an elevator arriving. I paused, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness of the accounting offices. The building was supposed to be empty. The cleaning crew had finished hours ago. I walked back toward the elevator bank, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpeting. The digital display above elevator 3 showed it had stopped on 15. The doors were closed. I pressed the call button. Nothing happened. I tried the button again, then moved to elevator 2. The call button lit up, and within seconds, the doors slid open with their familiar whisper. The elevator car was empty, just polished brass and that harsh fluorescent lighting that made everything look sickly. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. The doors closed, and the elevator began its descent. Floor 14. 13. 12. Between 11 and 10, the elevator stopped. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in dim red. I pressed the alarm button. Nothing. I tried my radio. "Base, this is Marcus. I'm stuck in elevator 2 between floors 10 and 11. Static. Base, do you copy?" More static, then a voice, but not dispatch. "Going up," the voice said. It was my own voice. I stared at the radio. What the hell? The elevator lurched upward. The floor indicator showed we were passing 12. 13. 14. It didn't stop at 15. I watched the numbers climb. 16. 17. 18. The Meridian Tower only had 40 floors, but the elevator kept going. 25. 30. 35. 40. 41. 42. This is impossible, I whispered. The elevator finally stopped at floor 57. The doors opened. I found myself looking at a perfect replica of the 15th floor, the same accounting offices, the same layout, the same beige carpet. But the windows showed nothing but black void. No city lights. No stars. Just endless darkness. I didn't get out. I pressed the lobby button. The doors closed, and the elevator began to descend. But when it stopped and the doors opened, I wasn't in the lobby. I was on floor 63. This floor was different. The offices were there, but they were wrong. The desks were too tall, the chairs too small. Computer monitors sat on the desks, but their screens showed only static. And in that static, I could swear I saw faces, dozens of faces, all of them my own. I pressed the lobby button again. Floor 71. This time, when the doors opened, I saw myself standing in the hallway. Same uniform, same face, same confused expression. The other me waved at me. Going up, the other me asked. The elevator doors closed before I could answer. Floor 88. The offices were melting here, walls flowing like wax, ceiling dripping in slow motion. Everything was the same sickly red as the emergency lighting. Floor 99. Here, there were no offices at all. Just a long hallway that stretched beyond the reach of my flashlight. Along the walls were elevators, dozens of them, their doors opening and closing in a rhythm like breathing. In each elevator car, I could see a figure in a security uniform. They were all me. Floor 112. No floor here. Just empty space. The elevator hung suspended in a void while I stared out at nothingness. In the distance, I could see other elevators, also hanging in space, also carrying men who looked exactly like me. I want to go home, I said to no one. The elevator began to move again, but this time sideways, sliding through the void toward one of the other elevator cars. As we drew closer, I could see the other version of myself more clearly. This me was older, my hair gray, my face lined with years of exhaustion. The old me looked at me and mouthed words, 23 years. Then we were moving again, up and up, through floors that shouldn't exist. Floor 206 was an exact replica of my apartment. Same ratty couch, same TV, same pile of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter. But when I looked out the window, I saw the Meridian Tower stretching up into infinity, its windows twinkling like stars. Floor 351 was my childhood bedroom. Same race car wallpaper, same twin bed, same model airplanes hanging from the ceiling. My mother was there, but she was facing away from me, and when she turned around, her face was a blank oval of flesh. Floor 499 was the lobby of the Meridian Tower, but it was wrong. The marble was black instead of white, and the security desk was manned by a figure in a security uniform who had no face at all, just smooth skin where features should be. I realized I was crying. Floor 512. This was where the elevator finally stopped for good. The doors opened onto a small office, just a desk, a chair, and a single window. On the desk was a security logbook. I picked it up and read the first entry. Night 1, routine patrol. Nothing unusual. Night 2, elevator acting strange. Stopped between floors. Night 3, elevators going to floors that don't exist. Night 4, I think I'm losing my mind. Night 5, I saw myself today. He waved. The entries went on for pages. Years worth of entries. The handwriting was my own. Night 8942, I don't remember what the real world looks like anymore. Night 8943. I tried to jump from floor 666 today. I just landed back in the elevator. Night 8944. Sometimes I forget my name. Sometimes I remember names that aren't mine. I flipped to the last entry. Night 8756. A new Marcus arrived today. I watched him from floor 99. He looked so confused. So young. I wanted to warn him, but what would I say? That he'll spend eternity riding these elevators? That every floor is a memory, a fear, a possibility that should have stayed buried? That the building isn't haunted, it's hungry? It feeds on routine, on the mindless repetition of walking the same halls, checking the same locks, watching the same empty spaces night after night after night until you become part of the building itself? I set down the logbook and walked to the window. Outside, I could see the city far below, but it was wrong. The streets formed patterns that hurt to look at, and the other buildings reached up like grasping fingers. The Meridian Tower stood in the center of it all, impossibly tall, its windows filled with tiny figures in security uniforms. I turned back to the desk and picked up a pen. Night 1, my name is Marcus Chen. I work security at the Meridian Tower. I need to write this down so I don't forget. Today, I got on an elevator that shouldn't exist. Behind me, the elevator chimed softly. Going up, asked a voice that was almost, but not quite, my own. I didn't turn around. I kept writing. Night 1, continued. I think the building wants me to forget who I am. I think it wants me to become just another guard walking the same patterns forever. But I won't forget. I'll write it all down. Every floor, every impossibility, every version of myself I meet. The elevator chimed again. I won't become routine. Chime. I won't become nothing. Chime. I set down the pen and turned around. The elevator doors were open. Inside stood an older version of myself, much older, my hair white, my face gaunt. Your shift's over, son, the old me said. Time to clock out. I'm not done writing, I replied. You're never done writing. None of us are. That's the point. I looked back at the logbook. The pages were blank. I just wrote. You write the same thing every night. You forget every morning. Welcome to the Meridian Tower, Marcus. Population, you. The old me gestured to the elevator. Going down? I walked toward the elevator, then stopped. What happens if I don't get in? You get in, the old me said simply. You always get in. We all do. It's routine. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. Floor 511. Floor 510. Floor 509. As the numbers counted down, I felt my memory starting to fade. The office with the logbook seemed like a dream. The impossible floors became hazy. The other versions of myself turned into shadows. By the time we reached floor 100, I couldn't remember why I was afraid. By floor 50, I was checking my watch and thinking about my rounds. By floor 20, I was just a security guard in an elevator, heading down to continue my patrol. The elevator stopped at the 15th floor. The doors opened. I stepped out into the familiar accounting offices. I checked my watch, 2:17 a.m. Right on schedule. I heard the soft chime of an elevator arriving behind me. I paused, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The building was supposed to be empty. The cleaning crew had finished hours ago. I walked back toward the elevator bank, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpeting. The digital display above elevator 3 showed it had stopped on 15. The doors were closed. I pressed the call button. Nothing happened. I tried the button again, then moved to elevator 2. The call button lit up, and within seconds, the doors slid open with their familiar whisper. The elevator car was empty, just polished brass and harsh fluorescent lighting. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. The doors closed. The elevator began its descent. Floor 14. 13. 12. Between 11 and 10, the elevator stopped. The lights went out. I smiled without knowing why. Going up? I said to myself. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice whispered, "This is your routine now, Marcus. Forever and ever and ever." But I don't remember why that should scare me. My name is Lisa Hartwell, and I need to tell someone about what I found in downtown Portland. I'm not sure anyone will believe me, but I have to try before I forget, or before it makes me forget. I'd lived in downtown Portland for 3 years and thought I knew every street, every building, every shortcut in my neighborhood. I was a freelance graphic designer who often worked late, and I'd walked these streets at all hours. I knew which coffee shop stayed open until 2 a.m., which alley was safe to cut through, which building had the broken streetlight that made the sidewalk treacherous in the rain. But on Thursday night, or technically Friday morning at 3:17 a.m., I discovered I didn't know my neighborhood at all. I was walking home from Grind Coffee after pulling an all-nighter on a logo design for a local brewery. My apartment was only 4 blocks away, a straight shot down Morrison Street. I'd made this walk hundreds of times, usually with my earbuds in, half asleep on autopilot. But that night, something was different. Between the vintage bookstore and the 24-hour laundromat, there was a building I'd never seen before. I stopped walking and stared at it, my laptop bag sliding down my shoulder. It was impossible. I walked past this exact spot twice a day, every day, for 3 years. There was supposed to be a small parking lot there, just a chain-link fence surrounding cracked asphalt where maybe 6 cars could park. Instead, there was a narrow, 5-story building squeezed between its neighbors like someone had inserted it with a crowbar. The architecture was all wrong for Portland, dark red brick with ornate stonework that belonged in Victorian London, not the Pacific Northwest. Gothic revival, maybe, with pointed arch windows and grotesque faces carved into the cornice. The strangest part was how it fit so perfectly. The neighboring buildings seemed to accommodate it naturally, their walls seamlessly connecting to its sides. If I hadn't walked this street 1,000 times, would have assumed it had always been there. A brass plaque beside the entrance read, "Blackwood Residences, EST 1892. I pulled out my phone and checked Google Maps. According to the satellite view, there was still a parking lot where I was standing. But when I looked up from my screen, the building loomed above me, its dark windows reflecting the streetlights like empty eyes. I should have gone home. I should have convinced myself I was tired, that I'd somehow gotten turned around, that there was a logical explanation. Instead, I walked closer. The front door was heavy wood with wrought iron hinges, and it was slightly ajar. Warm light spilled out from the gap, along with the sound of soft piano music, something classical I couldn't identify. I pushed the door open. The lobby was small but elegant, with marble floors and dark wood paneling. A crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows on the walls. To my left was an old-fashioned elevator with brass fixtures and an accordion gate. To my right, a narrow staircase curved upward into darkness. Behind a mahogany reception desk sat an elderly woman in a black dress, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked up from an ancient leather-bound ledger and smiled at me. "Miss Hartwell," she said in a voice like rustling leaves. "We've been expecting you." My blood went cold. "How do you know my name?" "You're here about the apartment, aren't you?" "Third floor, overlooking the courtyard. It's been vacant for quite some time." I don't know what you're talking about. I was just walking by and saw the building. I've never seen it before." The woman's smile never wavered. "Oh, but you have. You walk past us every day, twice a day. You just weren't ready to see us yet." She stood up and walked around the desk. Up close, I could see that her dress was actually deep blue, not black, and covered in a pattern that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at it. "Would you like to see the apartment? I think you'll find it quite suitable." Every instinct I had screamed at me to leave, to run, to get as far away from this place as possible. But something stronger than fear was pulling me forward, curiosity, maybe, or something else entirely. "Okay," I heard myself say. She led me to the elevator. The brass controls were worn smooth from decades of use, and when she pulled the accordion gate closed, it made a sound like a sigh. "Third floor," she said, pressing a button that looked like it was made of bone. The elevator rose with mechanical precision, but it felt wrong somehow, too smooth, too quiet, like we were floating rather than being lifted by cables and pulleys. When the elevator stopped, the woman opened the gate and gestured down a narrow hallway lit by wall sconces that flickered like candle flames. "Third door on the right," she said. "Take your time." I walked down the hallway, my footsteps muffled by a runner that was the same shifting blue as the woman's dress. The walls were covered in old photographs, portraits of people in Victorian clothing, their eyes seeming to follow me as I passed. The third door was already open. The apartment was perfect. Not just nice, perfect. It was exactly what I'd been looking for without knowing I was looking for it. One bedroom, one bath, a small kitchen with vintage appliances, and a living room with tall windows that overlooked a beautiful courtyard garden I couldn't see from the street. The rent was half what I was paying for my current cramped studio. The lease was already prepared, sitting on the kitchen counter with my name filled in. All I had to do was sign. I picked up the pen, an old-fashioned fountain pen with a silver nib, and held it over the signature line. That's when I noticed the other names on the lease. Previous tenants, I assumed. But as I read them, my hands started shaking. Sarah Chen. Marcus Williams. David Rodriguez. Jennifer Kim. I knew those names. They were people who had gone missing in Portland over the past few years. I remembered seeing their faces on social media, on news reports, on missing person flyers taped to telephone poles. Having second thoughts? The woman was standing in the doorway, still smiling that serene smile. "These people," I said, pointing at the names. "They're missing." "Missing?" She tilted her head like a curious bird. "Oh no, dear. They're not missing. They're home." I dropped the pen and backed toward the window. "I need to leave." "But you haven't signed the lease yet. Don't you like the apartment?" I said I need to leave. I pushed past her and ran toward the elevator, but the hallway had changed. It was longer now, stretching into darkness in both directions. The photographs on the walls had changed too. They were all of me now, dozens of portraits showing me at different ages, in different clothes, but always with the same vacant, peaceful expression. I found the elevator and frantically pressed the call button. When the doors opened, the elderly woman was inside, still smiling. "Going down?" she asked. I took the stairs instead. They spiraled downward, seemingly forever. I passed the second floor, then the first, then kept going. Basement level. Sub-basement. lower levels that shouldn't exist. The walls grew damper as I descended, and I could hear water dripping somewhere in the darkness. Finally, I reached a door marked Exit. I pushed through it and found myself in the courtyard I'd seen from the apartment window. It was beautiful, roses and jasmine climbing trellises, a small fountain in the center, benches positioned perfectly for quiet contemplation. And sitting on those benches were people in pajamas and robes, all staring up at the building with expressions of absolute contentment. I recognized some of their faces from the missing person reports. Sarah Chen sat by the fountain, still wearing the clothes she disappeared in 6 months ago. She looked up at me and waved. "Isn't it wonderful here, Lisa?" she called out. "So peaceful. So quiet. No deadlines, no bills, no stress. Just home." "This isn't home," I said, backing toward what I hoped was another exit. "This place isn't real." "Of course it's real," said Marcus Williams, appearing beside me. He looked younger than in his missing person photo, his hair fuller, his face less lined. "It's the most real place in the world. Everything else is just noise." I ran toward the garden gate, but it was locked. I climbed over it, scraping my hands on the wrought iron spikes, and found myself in an alley I'd never seen before. I ran toward what I thought was Morrison Street, but when I reached the sidewalk, I was somewhere else entirely. The buildings were different, the streetlights were different, even the sky looked wrong, too dark, with stars arranged in patterns that hurt to look at. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. The screen showed the time as 3:17 a.m., the same time I'd first seen the building. The date was the same too, like no time had passed at all. I started walking, trying to find something familiar, something that would orient me back to the world I knew. But every street I turned down led to more unfamiliar buildings, more impossible architecture, more alleys that shouldn't exist. After what felt like hours, I finally found Morrison Street. But it was wrong too. The buildings were in different positions, the coffee shop was gone, and there was a parking lot where the Blackwood residences had been. I went home and tried to sleep, convincing myself it had been a nightmare brought on by too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But the next morning, I found a key in my jacket pocket. An old-fashioned brass key with 3R engraved on the head. And when I walked to work that day, taking my usual route down Morrison Street, the Blackwood residences was there again. The elderly woman stood in the window, watching me pass. She held up the lease I hadn't signed and tapped the signature line with her finger. I kept walking, but I could feel the key growing warm in my pocket. That was 3 days ago. Since then, the building appears every night at 3:17 a.m. and vanishes by sunrise. The key gets warmer each time I pass. The woman in the window looks more familiar each day, like someone I should remember but can't quite place. Last night, I stopped in front of the building again. The door was open, and I could hear piano music drifting out. The same classical piece as before, but now I recognized it. It was my favorite song from childhood, something my grandmother used to play. I almost went inside. I'm writing this down because I know I'm going to go back tonight. The key is so warm now it almost burns to touch, and I keep thinking about that perfect apartment, about how peaceful Sarah and Marcus looked in the courtyard. Maybe they were right. Maybe everything else is just noise. If you're reading this and I don't update it tomorrow, don't look for me. Don't try to find the Blackwood residences. Just remember that some buildings only appear when you're ready to disappear. The key is glowing now. It's 3:16 a.m. Time to go home.